Hey everyone, I hope you are well. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears, on the Level Design Lobby. And this is another episode as we break down and answer questions from you, the amazing gurus who have sent your questions to us, and hopefully we can shed some more information. Hey everyone, you're joining me, your host, as I mentioned earlier, the one, the only. Actually, I'm not the one or only. There is another person in the world with the name Max Pears. So, the original OG, Max Pears. And as well, the associate producer of the Level Design Lobby, Alex Partridge.
Like the British answer to Arnold Schwarzenegger, I am most definitely back. Hello.
Well played. That was a good one. I like that. I like that.
Good.
Not Glad even mad. No, not even. Well played. Good one. It's a good one. So yes, this is the third episode for us to answer more questions. So we've got a few here. I think we'll answer somewhere between 5 and 7, depending on time, and just give back. So thank you all who have already sent in your questions. I know some didn't get answered in the previous episodes, but like I said, we're saving them to keep doing this. So, my man Alex, do you want to hit us with the first very question from that list, my friend?
So, Christopher Snow, has asked, how has the culture of different countries affected your work, i.e. UK versus Poland?
You know nothing, Christopher Snow. Sorry, you must get that a lot.
You don't know nothing, Chris Snow. Needs more northern, Max.
I completely forgot what she sounded like. So I apologise for one, the bad joke, but two, my worst delivery. So it's not good there. So as cultures and impacts, yes, they have for sure. I think one of the bigger things is more like, firstly, the architecture. And you'll do this through research anyway, but because you're living in different places, you will see a lot of different architecture, especially, for example, like Sweden. When I went over to Sweden, this is back on Division, I stayed there for about a month. And just how clean and modern their architecture was a huge thing to me. I think that was a big takeaway compared to, say, something like Poland, especially in Krakow, where it's not clean. It's more of, it's got this traditional kind of architecture, and then obviously the history when it was owned by the Soviet Union, how those, you can see the different styles of architecture built up. So I think that's one of the big takeaways, and it's very important for level design, because you see those different styles of architecture come together, which then can influence different views as well, and how we communicate things through signs as well. In Sweden, there was a really nice thing where I was hopping on a train, and you're in this train tunnel, and it's just got these lights on the back of the wall where the train will come. And then the train was starting to approach, and you saw those lights like suddenly all go on and off like a Mexican wave, showing the direction that the train was coming from. And that blew me away. So little things like that. There's small things in how people act and react. The Polish do things not very differently, but they have different tendencies to the English, and there's other different cultures. But that doesn't necessarily... Actually, I take that back. That does apply to my work, because communication is different here to, say, England. Just generally how people talk. Polish are a bit more... England's very polite, and what I'm saying in comparison is like sometimes we sugarcoat criticism, while the Polish are very much to the point, which can also be refreshing, but also very different and shocking from an English thing. And it's not a bad thing. It's just different ways that you communicate. So you've got to understand how to do that as well when chatting to people from different cultures. So those are the biggest takeaways, probably architectural style for level design, and also how we communicate and express ourselves when discussing different things. So that's really cool. Okay, with that answer, and I hope it was a satisfying answer, what is question numero dos?
Okay, so next question comes from Brad Butcher. And awesome. They have asked, what is your process from going from a high-level concept to actually building and completing a block out?
Okay, so that's a really cool question. What I'd think about with this one Generally, what I like to do is I like to start with something like a beat graph or a flow chart showing what is the most important thing from the level, what is the objective of this level, so that I know that how this will all connect together. After that, I will then start doing the research onto the area. So firstly, not just about the building. So to reference the level design weekend, we did a club in Japan, and obviously for the level design weekend, it was just about that area. But when it comes to working in games, and I've primarily worked in open world games, but I imagine this logic still applies to linear games as well, I start looking at the space where it's going to be. So in Division, a lot of stuff obviously the whole game took place in New York. So I had to do research on the space of New York, how the architecture was, where a club would be. Would it be in a big building or a small building? Is the district that I'm going to be placing this club, is this a poor district or a rich district? Because that will then dictate the answer to the previous question. I'll start to investigate these and break it down from there. After that, I will then start gathering a ton of references. Minimum images should be about 30 to 50 in my opinion. And especially floor plans. Get an understanding of a floor plan. And then after that, I might do a quick sketch. It depends how I'm trying to figure it out. I don't sketch every location. I sketch certain locations. Because if I don't understand the location, then I'll definitely sketch out, because it's easier to throw it away on paper, speak to some friends, see if they think that the layout works. And then after that, I will start to block things out from that sketch. Obviously, things will change. I'm never, ever committed to the sketch, because what might work in 2D might not work in 3D. And I'll break things down from there. After that, I'll start blocking out. Once the blockout's done, the first one, I'll then jump in and start playing it, seeing what I like, what I don't like. Because sometimes, for example, your flanking route might not actually be noticeable when you enter the door because it's too close and it's out of the player's field of vision. And start testing these things here. Start looking at the variation in height that I can maybe add, and looking at the beats themselves. And the final kind of thing after the multiple iterations, not the final thing, but partway through the iterations, I guess, I'll be asking the question, where's the crazy? Not every level needs to be crazy, but I think it's really important to see, what are you trying to push? What is the big selling point of this mission, of this area, whether it be an architectural style, maybe it's just the art itself, maybe it's this cool combat moment. Thinking, what is that moment that will make this memorable for the player? Obviously, a lot of play testing afterwards, after the kind of iteration, and making sure it works there. So that's generally my process. Obviously, time is a real big constraint. So sometimes I might miss certain steps I said there, but that, if time permitting, that is my kind of flow that I like to stick to.
So off the back of that one, we have another question from a different listener called Oliver Walker, but it is somewhat, I feel, in the same area, so we'll sort of jump straight on it. And they've asked, how often do you have to redesign a level?
Yeah. So Oliver sent me this message again privately, so I hope he doesn't mind this being shared. But I think this is a really great question, because firstly, I just want to congrats Oliver as well, because when I first met him, he was a listener. Now he's a member of the Patreon, but he was just graduating when I met him. He was there at a talk I was giving and a conference I was attending, and he now has walked into a job. So this is amazing. And it was one of the questions he asked me, because he had to redesign one of the levels he did when he started there. And I think when it's your first job, it can be super nerve-wracking. Like the fact that, I've done this, and it might not impress the people, or it's going to be asked to redesign. But let me tell you this, that's normal. Even if you're a senior or a lead, you're going to be redesigning plenty of things. So don't worry, it's all good. And the best thing is, the next time you do it, it's probably going to be better. And that's the most exciting part. Me redesigning, it's happened a fair bit. I couldn't give you a number, like how often on a regular basis. But there is times where I've done one version straight away, shown it to someone, say I've spent 2 days just quickly blocking something out. And then they've gone, no, this doesn't work. And this might happen 3 times over. And that's fine, that's normal. Because each time I did it, we got this bit right, then we got section B correct, and then finally the whole flow correct. So it happens. Don't be ashamed or worried. It's fine. And also, especially if you're a junior just starting, people are expecting that. I'll never forget, and this is a real funny story, I showed my lead at the time, he's now director, Manny Diaz, one of the first areas I flopped out. I just remember him being like, well, that's a level. And that was it. Like, and that's just, it's funny when I look back because I then got some great feedback from it. And he didn't say it in a bad or negative way. You know, it's just, it was a starting point for me. And the next time I did that level, it got better. And it became one of the better ones by the end of the game. I felt that we improved upon. So yeah, don't worry. It happens a lot. It happens all the time. Some of these changes will never be down to you because story might change. Something might have changed in production, so we can't make it as big or as grand as we planned. Something like that. So don't worry. They happen regularly. And will continue to happen, you know what I mean? So it's all good.
The way I see it is that iteration is something you should never be afraid of. Like Max said, an idea is only ever going to get better over time. And as time goes on, you will come to understand what it is you're making more and more. So it can only get better. And I think there's a rule in here that we can sort of steal from cooking. There's a rule in cooking where it says, like, if you're making things like pancakes, like the first one never comes out as good as the rest. So you always sort of just toss aside the first one. And I think that's true of level design and game design as well. Because you start out and you're sort of just experimenting with ideas, finding your feet. And it's often a collection of things that don't necessarily work or flow right. And, you know, there's nothing wrong or to be ashamed about by looking again or someone asking you to look again, because the idea is only going to improve. It's only going to get better. And as a result, the game will be better for it and people are going to enjoy it more. And that's the ultimate goal of what it is you're doing when you're developing content.
It's true. And I now just want pancakes.
Pancakes are good.
They're awesome. And speaking of awesome, what is the next question, Alex?
Ooh, good transition. So the next question comes from Brad Butcher again, and he has asked, what are some of the best pieces of advice you've received from co-workers/leads whilst working in the industry?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's many that I have received, and it's trying to remember them all. I don't know if there's some I can say as well. Okay, one of the best ones I think ever given was try not to get too scared when showing your work. You should want to show your work. Because, and I believe we've stated this in previous episodes, but just reiterating it, like, your stuff can only get better once you've had feedback. So make sure that you are looking for that feedback, because that's how you improve. So never shy away from that stuff, okay? Never shy away from that. Another best one that I got, and this was when, now I can obviously say, but Cyberpunk is first-person perspective, and Division was third-person. And this is the first time I've worked on a first-person title. And one of the things I got from my previous lead was because you can see a lot more in third-person and get a better reading of the room compared to first. What tends to happen if you just walk into a room right away, first-person, say it's the center of the room that you come in as well, then the player has to look left and right to get a whole lay of the land, which can be frustrating, but can also take time away, especially if they're going straight into combat. So one of the best things you can do in first person is slowly reveal the room. So maybe there's a corner that you have to turn because you've blocked it with some sort of props. Slowly revealing that is one of the best things I got for working on a first person level. So don't reveal all the information, slowly reveal it to the players there. Another one I think is basically how to angle walls. I think angling walls is one of the coolest. I had someone make a joke to me today because I told them to angle something. They're like, you just love it. And I do, because I think it's an amazing way to highlight certain routes as well as break up the line of sight. I think using angles in the right way, not just 90 degrees, but 45 degrees, can make a building feel more organic as well. And I'm really into that kind of way. I think that's really a nice one for it. Man, I've definitely had some great ones for it as well. I'm trying to remember some of them. What else we had? Another one that I found is making sure that players have a mental map of your level. So making sure that they understand where they are and how this whole level connects to one another. Having something like a landmark either in the center or at a certain point, as well as having certain paths, that are bigger or smaller to help guide the player. Which then moves on to another great tip which I got, which is a great way to separate the golden / main path to the side paths is just the width of the doors, from it being a double door to a single door, double door, the golden path, single door, side path, to also the width of the path itself as well. Those can all help with it. And making sure that these landmarks aren't 100% symmetrical, like just a giant circle or cylinder, because that's hard to read. So make sure it's got its own quirks on different angles. The backtracking and how I like to do backtracking that I mentioned earlier, that was some advice that I got, was really good. And also when you're having combat, make sure there's options not just for the player but for the enemies as well. Sometimes I like to look at the combat from how the player's going to come in it, but then imagine that I'm designing it for the enemies to win. Obviously not too much in their favor, but allowing them to have vantage points and flanking routes can make the combat seem much more engaging and creating that tension within it as well. So that's some of the big ones for it. There's probably more that I can write down, but off the top of my head, those are some of the best ones. There's been so many, and I'll give a shout out to all these amazing people who have helped me along my career. I want to give a shout out to Simon Cooper, who is the technical director at Ubisoft Reflections. Many of you know I was kind of like a technical level designer, he'll never admit it, on Division. So he was an amazing help. I sat next to him and he just pushed me so hard. If he hears that, he's going to laugh his head off. So he always was amazing at that. Daniel Molnar, who was my lead level designer, also on Division. He was amazing. He was the head of the open world team. He was great. We really had a great connection and he's just helped so much. Manny Diaz, who is the game director, level design director at Reflections. He's just been an inspiration for me as well. Just a great guy. And then we have Graham, who's a senior level designer. He's fantastic. Stuart Scott, who is an awesome senior. I think he's lead. He did one of the episodes as well. He's awesome. And then we have my teammates here at CD Projekt, who's, previously Yasin, Matt, Kendall, Jay. There's many more I could list on, so if I haven't listed your names, or Barnaby as well, then someone can send me an angry message, and I'm sure they will later. But then again, not everyone listens to me, so I know who you are. But yeah, no, it's been the biggest thing that I try to take away is I want to study from these people who've been great and then add my own twist. Add my own flair to my levels from it. So there's been amazing people who've helped me, and I definitely wouldn't be where I am without all these amazing people, no questions.
If you love game and level design as much as we do, then why not consider supporting Level Design Lobby on Patreon? Patreon is a crowdfunding platform that allows people to directly fund the content and creators that they love. From as little as $1 per month, you can help support us in our mission to unite and teach people across the world about the wonderful and unique field of game and level design, and get some great reward perks in return, such as access to the Level Design Lobby community Discord, bi-monthly webinars, level design weekends, and much more. So head on over to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support today. Finally, we'd just like to say a massive thank you to all our current backers. It's thanks to the generous support of people like you that we are able to grow and can continue to bring you awesome, new and exciting content. So thank you. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Now that we've got that question addressed, what is the next one, my friend?
So the next question comes from Marco Tuzinski. I hope I've pronounced your name right. Apologies if I haven't. And they've asked, when giving the player the option to choose between two paths that eventually lead to the same destination, how would you prevent them from trying to backtrack in a good way?
This is a really interesting one because I don't feel that you necessarily have to prevent them from backtracking. If you look at Uncharted, the Bioshocks, they have these branching paths which lead you in the same direction, and I've gone back to take the paths because I was like, oh, well, what was down the other way? It doesn't always need to be prevented, in my honest opinion, unless... I mean, the fact is you've given them a choice, so that choice should never be taken away. If it is, for example, that you are trying to gate the player because after they've finished this path, it leads to a certain objective, like a boss fight or a combat room, then yeah, there's ways you can do it with cutscenes. But honestly, I don't feel that there needs to always be a prevention for it. I can see why you wouldn't want players to turn around, because it does sometimes kill the illusion of choice, for example. It's a very interesting question, but like I said, I'm not too sure if it needs to be addressed all the time. I think you can have stuff, like Uncharted, where things collapse behind you. That's obviously a bit gamey, but it's definitely a way to prevent it. I don't know, it's a very interesting question. It's hard to answer off the top of my head, but as I said, I don't feel it always needs to be prevented, in my opinion. I'm not too sure when Marco asked this question, is he referring to backtracking itself, or when there is the two choices that lead to the same destination and you just don't want the player to run back on themselves through the other route. Backtracking is a very different thing completely. Then I have bigger opinions on this, because if you, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, the way I like to handle backtracking, though, if you are backtracking, is when you return to that destination that you've originally come from, then what I want is to lead the player so they revisit that same destination, but from a different angle, and probably a different height too. So say if you come into a room, you get the nice grand view of it, and you start on maybe the bottom floor. The next time you come in, you're coming from the side, so that way the room seems different, but you also come in on the second floor. So that way, when they revisit a space, it feels different, and also gives you a different lay of the land compared to how you originally visited. Those are the big things for backtracking. But as I said, if you're more worried about players just turning around, doing a 180 and going back, I don't see it as a huge bad thing. Like, you are never going to control what players are going to do. But I don't have a solid answer right now. Maybe we'll come back to this question, actually. So I can let me give you some time to think, Marco. Sorry if that's not been the best answer right now, but let me come back to that, because it's an interesting question. Cheers, though, dude. All right, then, my man. What is the final question of the episode?
So, final question for part 3 comes from Snow. And he has asked, have there been many changes in how your work is done over the years? Any significant changes in tools or technology?
Man, now I feel old. There's been quite a bit. Yeah, completely. One of the things that I started with is, obviously when I was like a teenager, was first Flash. So I made stuff in Flash, which, God, I couldn't even imagine trying to do now. When I think about like the pipeline going into keyframes, and that would probably frustrate me now. So done to that, to then I was doing stuff in level editors like Little Big Planet, which I love Media Molecule. I think they're amazing. One of my favorite devs, no questions. And how they gave back to the community with the level editor, and that helped me create levels, which is just awesome. Some really great stuff there that they've done, which has been amazing. To now you're seeing like all these engines for free for everyone. That's the biggest change. There weren't engines like Unity or Unreal. There were these modding kits before I got into things, and that's how a lot of level designers who are older than me got into their role, was through modding kits. So that's probably been one of the biggest changes, is the amount of technology that's now free. Like, when people ask, what can I do to stand out? Or I don't know how to stand out. I've got these ideas. Don't tell us your ideas. You have all the tools in front of you to make something awesome. There are no excuses anymore. Anyone can pick up Unity or Unreal, Game Maker, Construct, and probably more that I haven't even said, that you can go and make amazing things with. So don't believe that there's nothing you can do. Like, there's so much, and even more games having more modding kits with Far Cry 5, Doom in 2016. They've definitely been some of the big ones. I've never done anything for VR, but obviously that I've had friends who've worked in VR, so that's been a big change. I don't know what it's like to work in that though, so I don't know how that works. I did make an AR game, and that was crazy, especially because that was on mobile. And I think that's probably one of the biggest technology changes is games on mobile. That's where my first year of professional game making came from, was working as for games on mobile devices. And that was a huge thing. And how that's changed so much as well, the different style of games that have come out. And when they first came out, everyone had those virtual controllers in it with the virtual pad and buttons, which you still see certain ways today. But you're now seeing games which you've heard me mention before, like Florence, even Temple Run, take advantage of that touch screen and try to do different things with that. How awesome is that? So there's been a lot of actual changes. Oh, one of the first console game I ever made was for a console called Ouya. Some of you may not remember it, but it was an Android-based console, which sadly didn't take off. Do you remember the Ouya, Alex?
I do. It was supposed to be like the next big step forward in like console technology, wasn't it? And it sort of ended
for bridging.
Yeah, and it ended up being a massive flop, didn't it?
Please don't remind me, because I've got one in my dad's in my dad's attic.
I'm sure it makes a great paperweight.
Hey. It sadly didn't do well. It was a very interesting thing because it wasn't just them. There was Monster Cat with GameStick as well, who were trying to do this bridge between Android to console. It didn't obviously work out, but I've got one. I'm never going to do anything with it. Who am I kidding? But I've still got it there, and it's always going to be a memento because that's the first console I made for anything with it. But yeah, no, there's been tons of that stuff that have come and gone, and I'll be interested to see what happens with VR because it's not. I don't know about but I don't think anyone's except PlayStation has released any numbers on their selling, and PlayStation's got the most successful one. So I'll be interested to see how that advances forward. Augmented reality seems to be getting bigger again, which is interesting. So no, there's been a ton of changes, not just graphically, but also like what's available to you as a dev and what you can do. Like one-man team can make not only mobile games, but big games. I mean, how Notch made Minecraft, for crying out loud. Obviously, they became a team later on. So all these changes, all the skill set of people around in the industry. Alex, for example, is a multidisciplined man, in terms of what he can do. He's talented in multiple fields. So meeting those people now allows smaller teams in some sense. And that's great for getting small teams to make something quicker. Game jams are obviously a bigger thing as well. That's crazy. So yeah, there's been quite a lot. And like I said, it makes me feel old, and I actually haven't stopped to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's what sort of just listening to you sort of there just makes me realize just how much and how far we've come in like just the past decade alone. I think since we sort of started probably getting interested in game dev. Like you say, things like the mobile space, that was a big boom. And obviously VR had its own wave. I could probably comment a little bit more on VR side of things, because I did do a bit of dev on it. Sort of the way you have to approach VR does require sort of a slight rethink on how you'd normally design things. It's very player centric, like even more so than normal games. You have to think really intently about how the player moves and how they navigate levels, and you have to like prioritize their comfort like at all times. The game I worked on was published by Oculus, and they were very, very strict about making sure that the player was comfortable, that it wasn't too jarring or sort of nauseating for them to play. And they actually apply like a comfort rating to all their games. Oh, wow. For like to advise people like how it might make them feel. So yeah, it's a very different approach. And when I first worked in VR, it was a challenging switch of process, but I actually found it really interesting, and I actually found the extra constraints that were sort of piled on top of us. I mean, normally you think, oh god, extra constraints, this is going to be awful, but I actually really enjoyed the challenge because it really forces you to rethink how you approach just even the sort of the simplest of ideas that and notions that we would normally take for granted in a sort of what you would consider a normal first or third person game on any other platform. So but yeah, just to comment on the engine side of things, like the tools availability nowadays is ridiculous, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm so envious of people who are coming into the game dev space now, that they have all these tools available to them, all these like massively powerful pieces of software that previously were literally only accessible by big developers and studios. If I'd have had that level of access when I first started becoming interested in game dev and game design, I would probably be like somewhere completely different today if I'd have had that. And yeah, I'm really jealous as a result. But it's mad to think how far we've come, and also quite inspiring, and it gives me quite a lot of hope for the future of not only playing games but developing them.
Oh, for sure, I agree. It's going to be so interesting where it goes, and it's crazy because you see kids now wanting to be developers, at a younger age than before, and doing stuff at a younger age. One thing I forgot to say was like procedural generation. Obviously, that's a big thing now as well. I mean, one of the games just recently came out, Dead Cells. It's really, really good. That uses it as well. So it's changed massively, and that's awesome. Like I say, it's awesome. And who knows where we go from here? That's the really interesting point. All right, then. I think that wraps up the episode from me and the beautiful AP, the double AP, Associate Producer Alex Partridge. Just noticed that one there.
Crikey, I'd not realised that either.
So we just want to say thank you again so much for listening and tuning in. Thank you for sending in the questions. We obviously appreciate them because we get to do an episode like this. It helps build a better relationship with us and you, which is super important. So yeah, any last words from you, mate?
I'd just like to say, if you do have any more questions for us, don't feel you have to wait until we put out a call for you to submit questions to us. Literally, anytime a question pops in your head, if you're a member of our community, feel free to just post it at us on our Discord, or if you're not, fire it across to either the Level Design Lobby email, which is leveldesignlobby@gmail.com, or Max, who is at Max Pears, or even myself, who is at Alex M. Partridge on Twitter. So yeah, don't be afraid or don't be shy, guys. We're open and we're listening.
Exactly, man. All right then, everyone, take it easy, and we'll catch you all next time.
Bye-bye.